Hello and welcome to My Karate, My Life. I'm Chrissy Howard. This podcast is a space for stories, lessons and reflections from a lifetime of karate. I've spent over 4 decades training, teaching and learning, not just how to move but how to grow. And through that time I've come to realise that karate is never just about technique, it's about who you become along the way. In this podcast I'll be sharing personal stories from my journey, the challenges, the doubts, the lessons that have stayed with me and the moments that shaped not only my karate but my life. We'll talk about confidence, about fear, about resilience and about what it really means to keep going even when things feel difficult. Some episodes will be quiet reflections, some will be lessons from the dojo and some will be conversations with others walking their own martial path. This isn't about being the best, it's about showing up, learning and continuing, no matter where you are on your journey. Whether you've trained for years or you've never stepped into a dojo, I hope something here speaks to you. So thank you for being here and I look forward to sharing this journey with you. Hello everyone and welcome back to the My Karate, My Life podcast. This is episode 17 and I am Chrissy Howard. One of the things I wanted this podcast to become was diverse. I never wanted it to be solely about psychology, Budo, or neuroscience, or even me. Fascinating though those subjects might be, I also wanted it to encourage me to revisit the nuts and bolts of our karate, to take techniques that were performed thousands of times and to look at them with fresh eyes. After all, I guess that's what lifelong learning is. Not to collect more answers, but to continue asking better questions. Today's question is deceptively simple. Does turning the fist make the punch more powerful? I've practiced Gyaku for decades. I've taught it, I've corrected it, I've demonstrated it, and like most karateka, I was taught from an early age that the twist at the end of the punch was an important contributor to its power. But over the years I know this has been challenged and I started to ask myself, is that actually true? Not because I doubt my teachers, far from it. I ask because I want to understand more deeply. That's of course one of the greatest gifts that karate has given me, and that's permission to remain curious. If we stop asking questions simply because something has always been done a certain way, our learning begins to stagnate. So let's ask the question, why do we rotate the fist? Finding myself doing it as I'm saying it, why do we rotate the fist? Most of us have heard the explanation, the twist creates power. But when we look closely at the biomechanics of punching, something really interesting appears. The punch doesn't suddenly become more powerful in the final centimetres of its journey. The real work has already begun much earlier. Power starts beneath our feet. Karate starts from the floor up, is my mantra. I say it in my own dojos over and over again. We drive into the floor responds with an equal and opposite force. That ground reaction force travels through the ankle, the knee, the hip, into the pelvis, through the trunk and into the shoulder, along the arm and finally into the fist. The fist is simply the last link in the kinetic chain. That began, of course, at the ground. If one of those links leaks energy, a collapsing trunk, disconnected hips or poor shoulder alignment, the force arriving at the fist is reduced. From that perspective, it's difficult to argue that the final twist of the forearm suddenly creates the power. Instead, it seems far more likely that the rotation helps organise the final structure. It aligns the wrist, it brings the radius and the ulna into a mechanically favourable position. It stacks the wrist behind the first 2 knuckles. It allows the force already generated by the body to be transmitted more efficiently into the target while reducing unnecessary stress on the joints. That's a very different position or proposition. At the moment, it's the same position, but it's a very different proposition than the one we mentioned earlier. The twist doesn't necessarily create the power, it may simply help deliver it. So here's something I found fascinating. When I began paying attention to what actually happened during impact, I noticed something. In my own training, particularly when striking pads at close distance, I rarely make contact with a completely straight arm, nor do I consistently reach full forearm rotation before contact. Very often, for me, impact occurs while the fist is still closer to a vertical position. Now that's simply my observation. It isn't a universal truth. Distance changes things, intent changes things, application changes things. Sport kumite, kion, kata, and close range self-protection all place different demands upon the body. So I'm not suggesting one position is universally superior. I'm simply suggesting we observe what really happens rather than we assume what actually happens. Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, does turning the fist create power? Perhaps we should ask, what purpose does turning the fist actually serve? The subtle change in language completely changes the investigation. Could it improve skeletal alignment? Almost certainly. Could it help protect the wrist? Probably. Could it create greater stability through the elbow and shoulder by engaging the muscles responsible for forearm pronation? Possibly. Could it contribute to what we call kime? Perhaps. Although I'd argue that kime isn't something reserved for the final millisecond of a punch. True whole body connection can be created at almost any stage of movement through appropriate timing of muscle contraction and relaxation. That's one of the reasons I often speak about muscle twitching and efficient recruitment rather than simply being tense. What's equally fascinating is that not every martial artist will agree. Many boxers land before complete pronation. Some Okinawan systems favour a vertical fist. Others use approximately 45-degree angles. Each evolved for a particular context and application. Maybe there isn't one universally correct answer. Maybe context determines the answer. But for me, the biggest lesson isn't about the fist at all. It's about the brain. Again, it's about the brain. Of course it is. I always come back to the brain. Every movement we repeat strengthens neural pathways. Of course it does. There's a well-known principle in neuroscience. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every repetition makes the movement easier for the nervous system to reproduce. Eventually, we no longer think about it. The movement becomes automatic. That, of course, is incredibly useful until the movement becomes so automatic that we stop observing it. Habit is, of course, efficient, but habit can also blind us. One of the greatest dangers in martial arts is confusing familiarity with understanding. Just because we've repeated something 10,000 times doesn't necessarily mean we've explored it. Real learning often begins the moment we interrupt the automatic program, when we deliberately slow it down, when we change one variable, when we compare, when we ask ourselves, what happens if I stop rotating? What happens if I rotate earlier or even later? What happens under pressure? What changes when the distance closes? What feels stronger? What feels safer? What actually happens not what I think happens. Those questions force the brain to leave its comfortable motorway and begin exploring side roads. From a neuroscience perspective, that's when neuroplasticity comes alive. The brain starts creating and strengthening alternative pathways. It compares sensory information, evaluates efficiency, and updates its internal model. Learning isn't simply repeating. Learning is adapting. Sometimes the greatest progress doesn't come from doing more repetitions. It comes from paying more attention to the repetitions that we already do. This, of course, reminds us very much of the traditional Japanese concept of shuhari. In shu, we copy faithfully without alteration. That stage matters because we need a foundation before we can evaluate it. Then comes ha. We begin to investigate, not because we reject tradition, but because we respect it enough to understand it. We ask questions, we test ideas, we compare experiences, and then finally not abandoning tradition, but transcending blind imitation through genuine understanding. Perhaps that's what the conversation is really about, maybe. So not whether the fist finishes vertically or horizontally, not whether one style is right and another wrong, but whether we remain curious enough to keep learning. For me, karate has never been about certainty. It's been about exploration. Every question opens another door. Every observation reveals another layer. And every time we ask why, we become just a little bit more aware than we were yesterday. Maybe turning the fist isn't the real lesson. Maybe curiosity is. Remember this though, these are only my thoughts that have led me to be curious, that have led me to read a few things, to maybe help me understand better, and maybe to challenge myself and my karate. My concluding thought at the end of all of these episodes is, I don't feel that I'm right and I don't feel that I'm wrong. Everything is everything and all of it is moving all of the time. Thank you for listening. I hope the prod creates some curiosity in you too, if of course your mind hasn't already been open to it. Until next time, keep training, keep questioning, and above all, keep learning.